another great concept to help with, being a little more gentle on yourself and your partner is remembering that my partner volunteered for said position. They didn't get drafted. They're not obligated to put up with whatever comes out of my mouth or whatever I forget to do. I mean, they're a volunteer, and so maybe they should be treated as such.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Lyon Folsom, and we're going to be talking about love and relationships and how he became a coach in that area. He's the author of an award-winning book called Soul Statements, which is a love coach's guide to successful communication, and that is basically what we are talking about today, how people can communicate better and what are the skills that he teaches people in all types of relationships, not just romantic relationships, but everything. Corey assists people in their relationships from all over the world to increase the soulfulness, clarity, and ease with which they experience life. Corey is very passionate about helping people expand their empathy and communication skills. So let's jump into it. This is Lyon Folsom. Good afternoon, Corey. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks, Bob. I'm glad to be here.
And as I was telling you, I want to start with talking about neuro-linguistic programming because I haven't really discussed that on the show yet, and I want to do that because I know that's your background, and then we'll get into your book and the relationship stuff. So tell me how you got into neuro-linguistic programming, and actually maybe tell the audience exactly what it is, because I've dabbled many decades ago, and it was a little much for me to comprehend at the time.
Interestingly enough, it was one of my very first things of that nature that I was introduced to as a very young man. I was probably 20, 21 years old, and working with young people, teenagers, in a wilderness setting in Idaho, and we're practicing primitive kind of lifestyle. We just have a blanket, 2 blankets in the winter, wrapped up with some twine and slung over our back, and for 21 days, and a little packet of dried food for a week. And the person that would come in, the counselor that would come in once a week, hike into where we were, he did a lot of neuro-linguistic programming with the kids. So teaching them how to maybe think a little differently, how to have a little different perception, and how to, change some habits. And so we learned about, eye movements and what part of the brain is being accessed to, say, access a truthful memory versus make something up. And so that was my first introduction to it. And then a few years ago, I made a little more formal study, and we learned all about how the brain works and how to there's things called a swish where it's real similar to affirmation, only you're involving more physiology is how I would put it. Yeah. So I'm certainly not the world's leading expert on NLP, far from it, but I've had a somewhat of a basis in it.
Yeah. What I felt with a little bit that I looked at or was shown, that it was had the potential to be a very manipulative tool in dealing with
Mm-hmm.
people. Like I wonder like who I'm when I'm dealing with people in the world, if there are they people that have like studied this and they're working me, not that I feel like taken advantage of because I don't, but I always wonder about that because there's that potential for when certain tricks of how things work to use it for not the best outcomes or maybe your own personal outcomes but not the other person.
Sure. The main way I incorporate it into my life is just watching people's body language, and it helps you kind of read that a little bit. And that's basically the extent of how I actually put it into practice.
Yeah. I did an episode on something called brain spotting, and that's part of what they do there. They look at where the eyes go when you talk about certain things. And
Yes.
certainly when you look at videos of people that are like profilers and they are interviewing, criminals and they look at the blink rate and all these, they're looking up. So they're making up a story because they're trying to come up with something. They're looking down because they're, whatever that reason is. And it's sort of a fascinating thing how there's tells in
Yes.
people, and I think there's an intuitive sort of understanding of it that almost everyone has. But then there's the people that study it. It's really fascinating stuff. How
Yeah, I think in that context, one of the most important thing is to establish a baseline. What is their body language, their body mechanics, eye movements, things like that. That when they're just talking, and then when you add a little, more something a little more stressful topic or question, what changes?
and then there's people that you meet them and they seem fairly or very centered and calm and like present, and they're really connecting when they're talking to you. And those are people that I like almost immediately. I feel like I'm being listened to, and that's just that to me is just a wonderful thing, because when you meet people that are unsettled, you pick it up. You pick it up pretty fast. Even somebody that doesn't study anything. So
Yeah.
yeah, and like I know you, and then we're going to segue into the relationship. Watch this. Watch how I do this. So when you're talking to somebody that is looking to maybe improve their relationship skills or find a romantic relationship, I would think that'd be a lot of it. You probably notice a certain way that maybe they're communicating even with you, where they're not connected, or they're feeling like they're measuring their words in a way that's uncomfortable. You can tell they're uncomfortable. Does that play into what you're doing?
Yes, and the good news is that successful communication is a learned skill, meaning it can be learned. And so we can learn to, for instance, when you're talking to a companion, instead of starting your sentences with you, or you this and you that, you can speak to your own experience and start maybe sentences with I. Well, I felt concerned when, fill in the event. And so it's more connecting, because if someone's telling me what they think of something I did or didn't do, well, that's what they think and I have what I think. Whereas if they're sharing how it impacted them, so that they've led with some kind of feeling, concerned, I feel concerned at times as well. I can relate to that. I can empathize with that more easily. And it's a way to kind of turn down the temperature, the emotional temperature a bit by talking about yourself.
It also gives a vulnerability. The person sees, oh, this person's willing to open up about themselves. So they're immediately another level of comfort.
And a lot of couples, I say, model what you would like to experience. So if you're modeling an undefended heart or a less defended heart, you win even if the other person doesn't reciprocate, because that's how you want to be. That's how you want to live and experience life. And you're offering an example. And if they choose to speak in that way too, all to the good.
It's a hard thing to do because, if you open up like that and you don't get it back, it's an uncomfortable feeling. where you're just like, ooh, they're not on the same page, or that was kind of
Right.
nasty, or that was, it's an, and so are you deal mostly with couples, like, or couples
I w-
together, or people trying to get into a relationship or find,
yeah. In the way we communicate too, we can adjust the volume as needed as we go. But I work mostly with women who, I mean, this is who calls me,
Mhm.
women who want to prepare themselves to meet someone special, but they don't want to repeat the same poor patterns that they've experienced in the past. And sometimes they, or they, and then the other kind of group of people that I'll work with is, and it usually starts with the woman. She's saying, I want a better experience with my husband, and she kind of drags him in, and then we start where we are and we work with that.
It's not therapy, it's something else. I mean, there's a little bit of therapeutic kind of idea behind it, but you're working on experience doing this rather than, I don't think there's a schooling of any kind, which seems to, it has its pluses and minuses. I mean, I've done a little couples therapy in my day way back, and it was helpful. Not great. It was okay.
Well, the one of the beauties of coaching is that we're not really concerned with why something happened.
Hmm.
We're just concerned about what we're going to do now, what we're going to do next. How can I be okay no matter what someone else does or doesn't do? The best outcome is when someone's, looking for a nice person to be with, and through their journaling homework and questions that I suggest they ask of themselves, and whatever our process is, it's such a beautiful thing when they actually find the prize, which is themselves, the ability to fall in love with themselves again. And oftentimes that has to start with, maybe love is a big of an ask. Maybe we start with accepting, oh, you know what? I did that. I'm not happy with it, but it happened. I did it. I had my motivations. The question would be, how can I be better? Where's my trigger point, and how can I, steer the ship in a different way?
I'm wondering because I've been out of the game of I've been married a long time, so I don't know really even how stuff works anymore. Used to be that you met people through friends. That was pretty much it, the same circle. But
Mhm.
now I have a lot of younger friends, and they work with apps and those things, and which is, you're starting a little further back with, you don't get a history, and you don't have people to ask about this person. What kind of person is this that that I just met at the party that we were all at? That, and I think that's important stuff. I think that, I think it helps a lot, because if you're starting with a blank slate, anybody can say anything and pretend to be anything. So it does take a little bit of time to kind of, I'm assuming, to kind of work through all that stuff, because everyone's got a story and they want to look as good as they can to get what they want, whether it's it could be a variety of things, but so do you deal, you must have to work with that, because that is a very different thing than when I was dating way back in the day.
Yeah, there's a couple things I thought of that when you were talking, that successful couples, or couples that are more successful than others, do. And one of those is fairly regular check-ins. And maybe when you're a new couple, maybe you do that once a week. You sit down on a Sunday morning or whenever and say, hey, what worked for me this week? These are the things I liked that worked for me, and this other thing or things didn't work as well as I wanted. This wasn't working quite so well. And then before you then go right into a request, which is a strategy for the future, just listen, close your mouth and listen to what they have to say. And then when you can feel acknowledged, when you can acknowledge the other person, they feel acknowledged, the hearts feel more warm, more open, and then you're in your mind, you're looking for, oh, how can I give to this person versus what am I going to extract as far as some kind of promise or something. And the other thing besides checking in is the attitude. What would I want to give or co-create, or what am I bringing? My current partner, when I first was seeing her, and I would drive to where she was, her house, and I would park a block or two away, and I would just sit there and get quiet and just feel into, what's my motivation? How do I want to be, and how do I want to bring that? And so I had this attitude of what I'm looking to give and create, and I call it, if we were to form it into a memorable question, I would say, am I clinging or am I bringing?
Oh, okay. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing when maybe two people are not on the same wavelength that particular moment, that can be kind of uncomfortable, or I think there's a tendency to want to win in a conflicting situation. Well, you did this and you did that, I did that and you did this, and I'm on the higher road, so I win. Or you promised you wouldn't do that and you did it, so now I win. Or I lose because I and it's in those kinds of I'm looking at conflict now. When there's conflict, there's a tendency to want to win. It's and when, even if somebody wins, the relationship loses because there's an uncomfortable thing there. So to stay out of that attitude of I won and you lose, and I'm better in this situation than you are. How do both people win? Really, is what you're kind of looking for, without saying things that are going to make the other person feel badly for really not much of a reason. It's because there's things that are sort of true-ish, whether you like it or not. They are that, and so if you are able to talk about it as if you're sort of detached in a sense, like you're looking from above at, here's behavior that I do, here's behavior that you do. We've got this pattern going that's not working. There's a lot of that happens. My wife and I have had the same 2 or 3 arguments for 30 years. Keeps coming up. It's got less energy, less power to do anything. There's more humor around it because it's just what happens, when we're not aware. I'm talking too much. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. A couple things that can help set up for a better outcome. And firstly is to remind yourself to remember, they're not me. They had a different upbringing, different parents, different siblings, different bullies, different school, different gender, probably all sorts of differences and pressures and different dreams. And so they're going to naturally respond like someone who experienced all that, as will I naturally respond like someone who experienced all I have. We have to remember to not be mad or surprised or disappointed when they react differently than I would have given a certain situation. It's like, oh, of course there must be something different about them. Of course there is. Just realizing that, and then being curious. Curious will get you a long way. And if you're going back to knowing what you're bringing, what you're about, what you're up for, what you're not up for, you're less threatened because you know what you're there for. It makes it a little easier to just be curious and saying, so instead of saying, well, I think this about you because of what you just said or did, you can say, oh, that's not what I expected. Why would you say that? Or I'm really curious maybe what was going on with you that you did this or didn't do that. That curiosity is really helpful, and just trying to understand. I think it was Stephen Covey, that was one of his 7 laws. Give understanding before trying to be understood.
That sort of radiates out into global problems too. I mean, it really is, it is the biggest sort of issue with people getting along in any arena. Is one is listening, and 2 is trying to have empathy and understand where they might be coming from, and then speak. And you've got to be judicious about how you phrase things based on what you know about the other person. I'm not saying be afraid or anything, but just be, aware that, okay, well, if I say, this is if you know somebody, if I say it the way I said it last time, it's not going to go well. But sometimes it does, sometimes a really direct sort of, even, if you know somebody really well, you can say certain things that you wouldn't say to them maybe when you first met them, of course. And that's sort of the beauty of long-term things. I think you kind of get a shorthand with what works and what doesn't.
That's right.
I know when I'm in a pissy mood, though, nothing's going to satisfy me. Those are probably times not to talk. You got to know when not to talk.
Right. Or if you do talk, you might say some version of, hey, my well's running a bit dry. I need to, in the interest of being a better partner, I need to just go be by myself for a little while.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. I say I'm filled up. I got nothing left. I can't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just too much information. There's too many words. My brain can't handle it. And no, I like the case. I think women, at least my wife, is very verbal and loves to connect with words. I'm much more quiet.
Yes.
She said, somebody was telling her, they go, Bob's really a man of few words. And she goes, Bob's a man of no words.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm happy to just sit. I don't, with somebody that I care about, I don't really even need to say that much a lot of the time.
Well, and part of it is because, your affection, your devotion to this person didn't change in the last 15 minutes. And so you've established, that's my chosen person. And so you're good. Whereas the other person might need more, a little confirmation of that a little more often.
And that's a good example of, well, why would you need that? I don't need it. I don't need confirmation. I know that you're there, and I know it's okay. But the other person might go, well, I want to hear it.
Yeah. Well, they're not a defective Bob. They're a perfect whoever they are.
Yeah, sure. Right.
Or at least maybe not perfect, but natural, just naturally this.
So that's a little, that's some sort of basic training. We don't learn that anywhere, really. And, you either figure it out yourself or you get some help doing it. It's, it would probably be not a bad thing to teach some of this stuff in schools in some way, not necessarily romantic things in elementary school, nothing like that, but just, communication skills. I mean, that maybe they do that in schools. They didn't do it when I was there. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, no, nor in mine. And that's the thing, our parents or our family of origin. I mean, that's our models, our gurus for intimate relationship, for communication, and as such as it is. But back to your other comment, though, too. I mean, I didn't start really feeling like I was getting a handle on any of this until my 40s. So,
that's about right.
Now I'm in my 60s. So,
right.
But my one teacher used to say, relationships don't end for lack of love. They end for lack of intimacy. And what he was meaning was intimacy in the broadest context of just knowing each other and knowing and trusting and letting that other person really know why you're here.
The part of that that's a little scary is, well, if I do that, if I show that other person, they might not love me anymore, because it's not always pretty.
Well, I mean, I remind my partner fairly often. I mean, just the other day I said, I am so glad to be on this journey with you. She liked hearing that. So, and it's true.
Yeah.
So it all worked.
Yeah, I've said those things. Yeah. I was just thinking about when you said that it's mostly women that come to you looking for a relationship that's of some substance, and maybe breaking patterns, and it's mostly women doing that, which is
Yes.
kind of an interesting thing. I now that I have daughters, that are in their 20s, I get to see what women are like in their 20s, at least those two women, what they're like. And I have a lot of sort of understanding and compassion for the women that I was going out with in my 20s, that, there's things that just never would have worked by the way we were, and they didn't. But when I think about, I think women, this is a very general thing, but I would tell women, I would say this to any woman, my daughters: don't sleep with somebody right away. Become friends. If you want something that is going to last, don't jump into that right away, and pay for a background check.
Yeah.
But what I mean by a background check is find out about who this person is from other people. Don't just create what you want the person to be and then make it true in your mind. Keep your eyes open and pay attention. Listen to the words, watch the actions. Speak up for yourself. Don't be, somebody that just goes, "Oh, that's so funny," and you don't think it's funny. Or
Yeah. Well, I love what Benjamin Franklin was quoted as saying. He said it really well. He said, before marriage, keep your eyes wide open. Afterwards, half shut.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how many times he was married, but he was a fairly frisky guy from what I've read about.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe he was observing others. And,
Yeah,
the thing is, too, another great concept to help with, being a little more gentle on yourself and your partner is remembering that my partner volunteered for said position. They didn't get drafted. They're not obligated to put up with whatever comes out of my mouth or whatever I forget to do. I mean, they're a volunteer, and so maybe they should be treated as such.
Yeah, I don't like that, but you're right. So let's talk about your book and what you're trying to do in that book, and what you're doing, not trying to do. You're doing it. Okay, the title is, once again,
Soul Statements, a Love Coach's Guide to Successful Communication.
Great title. And you have chapters in there, words. What?
I do. I got it right here. What this book can do for you. That's how it starts off. And then soul statements, be present to win, going deep, conversation with self, giver of power, ritual and family, intimate relationship communication, intimate relationship distress, and intimate relationship harmony, and then living in integrity. So those are the chapters.
But all good stuff.
It took me about 4 years to write. So, and I had a writing coach kind of prodding me along.
And I'm assuming, happily, that you've got some great success stories. That would be, the real testament to what you're coaching.
Indeed. People who read the book love the book. Basically, Soul Statements is based on the premise that answers are in your center, and that our inner dialogue, that conversation in our head, that can become an ally. And we can even script in advance how we want to speak to ourselves to create greater emotional coherence. So in other words, if you're spiraling down and thinking some version of I'm less than, or I'm unworthy, or I'm afraid, or whatever it may be, you have this soul statement ready to go. So such as, I can call upon the grit inside me. My heart is a trusted guide. My body knows how to heal itself. There's strength in my center. And so basically, you realize that you're having this unhelpful thought or attitude, and then you declare that soul statement silently or aloud and feel the truth and the rightness of it. And so you're anchoring to what you already have as a internal resource to make your next thought be influenced by that versus, so it's a pattern interrupt, as we would say in NLP.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's anchor to something that's actually true, because I'm reminded of something Mark Twain wrote. Here again, I'm going to have to paraphrase. I've suffered a great many calamities in my life, most of which never happened.
I know. I was just talking. I talk about this all the time. The chatter between my ears that isn't even close to being accurate.
Yeah.
The conversations that I have with people that aren't there.
Sure.
And how those are going to go when I do have them. I may never even have them. And what I'm going to say when they say the thing that I'm thinking they're going to say, it's unbelievable.
And I had a girlfriend once who said, oh, when this or that happens, when I'm in some whatever form of distress she was talking about, this is what I want to hear from my man at that moment. And it was like, oh, and then she actually wrote it out and stuck it on the fridge. And I'd be like, oh, that's the thing to say. I'm a guy. I love instructions, right? So that's that part of that little kernel helped kind of create soul statements eventually. But what I'll do with myself is in my own head, I'll think, oh, yeah, I used to believe that. And what's really true is, I can trust my deep knowing to guide me, or I have a certainty that's deeper than my thoughts. Or just, hey, I got this. And so I tend to have a soul statement tailored to whatever, the particular pathology that's rattling around up there at a given moment. Whereas some people, I have this one woman that I coached not long ago, and she just has one fits all soul statement. She just says, I got this. The thing is, what's right about you is always available. I mean, what's wrong is always available about anything, but also what's right is there if we want to focus on that.
I always think, too, that when and I've heard this before, it's not an original idea, that when you're having a discussion or a conflict, that it's not just you and the other person in the room. Their parents are there and so are yours. There's a lot of people in there, in that room. There's, old belief systems that just keep, and they're so ingrained, and there's, do you work with people on that kind of stuff, on some of their beliefs where they're like, well, I'll pick anything. Men can't be trusted. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm.
A woman thinks that because of whatever happened.
Sure.
And so there's he's a nice guy, but ultimately this guy can't be trusted because he's a guy, and how do you, that almost seems like a separate bit of work that's not in with the relationship in a sense, but it is. Yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I don't have this one. I just picked it. So
yeah. So in that case, my instinct would be to work on that person trusting their own heart, their own instincts, their own intuition, their own certainty. And I would maybe help them, guide them through questioning, giving them things to contemplate, some journal prompts, write about this. And so that they're learning to trust themselves. And maybe they can trust their own voice to speak up when things are not looking so good. And a lot of times we don't speak up because we don't know what to say. So it's like, oh, okay, well, your dummy dog guy does this or that or says this or that. What would be your response now before it happens? What would you want to say? And then we could even role play. I can play him, and you can practice saying it to me. And so, it could be something like, hey, I love you, and this is hard for me to hear or be around. I'm just going to go somewhere else for a while, or whatever it may be, or that doesn't feel good, and depending on the person and your relationship, you might lead with something positive, as I did before. I love you, and I can't take this right now. So I'm a big fan of I love you, and.
Mm-hmm. Good way to start.
Yeah, helps my brain when I hear it.
I was talking to this friend of mine. We were just talking about sort of the mercurial nature of women at certain times. They seem to be a little bit more emotionally driven than men for the most part. And here I go. Here's a sentence you might want to say. Don't take this the wrong way, but I love you very much.
There you go. Well, and that's the thing is, if it was a world full of guys and there weren't women, it would be like, David Data talks about it being like a black and white world. Everything would be shades of gray. But luckily there's women, and they bring color and light.
Yep.
And they see different things. They notice different things. And so I remember I actually put it in the book too. A friend of mine, the three of us were together, and my girlfriend apologized for being so sensitive. And he had the greatest response. He goes, actually, your sensitivity lets me know that I need to tune up and not be so coarse, or whatever it was. And so it's a gift to me, because otherwise I wouldn't notice. I would just cruise along thinking everything's hunky-dory. And, you're like my emotional, and he didn't use this term, I'm just talking now. But I think of my girlfriend as like an emotional weather vane. And she feels things and notices things that I wouldn't. And yet it's good for me to pay attention to what's working for her, because I want to be a certain kind of man. I want to have not sensitivity actually to myself as much as just be sensitive to her. And that carries us a long way in a good direction when I can appreciate her sensitivity.
The other thing too that I've had to learn is to listen even when I'm not interested.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was told that that's not a bad thing to do.
Right. Well, and what I love is acknowledgement too, is because I had a client he didn't want to acknowledge his wife when she's having, a problem with this or that. And I'm like, you don't have to agree in order to acknowledge. He was, oh, right. And so it's like, oh, I understand that you're upset. I can see that this is distressing to you. You don't have to agree that she should feel distressed. I wouldn't feel distressed if it was me. Well, guess what? It's not me. And so when someone says to me, I can hear that you're unhappy, I'm like, yeah, I just got a little less unhappy hearing them say that. Yeah. Yeah. And then in those moments, I mean, a soul statement's actually similar to just acknowledging your own heart too. One of my teachers, Scott Katamas, taught me about if I'm feeling some kind of ouch in my heart, some wound got touched, and all of a sudden I'm like, I feel bad about whatever. And instead of just speaking to that immediately, and now we're in this back and forth about it's going to like 0 to 100 kind of he says, offer acknowledgement to your own wounded heart. And just, you can put a hand on your heart if you're by yourself, or just, virtually put a hand on your heart and just say, oh, you're saying this inside to yourself. That didn't feel good. Give a little love to your own heart. Be like, just acknowledgement of like, oh, I'm feeling contracted. Okay. And then ask a question. Just be curious. that hurt a little bit. I'm wondering why he would say that, or where did that come from? And just then zip it up and listen. And that's just leads to better outcomes than just saying, "Ow, that you're dumb," as opposed.
That's saying what you really want to say. That's stupid.
Well, what I really want is to be the kind of person that could respond instead of react. And that's partly why I wrote the book, because my coaching clients were having so much success with talking differently to each other. Then I thought, oh, I'll write a blog. And then it was bigger than that. So,
Yeah, I noticed that sometimes when I do what you're suggesting, the way it feels is I'm not standing up for myself, and that coming back hard with that's bullshit. I don't like that. That's stupid. Whatever it is, not stupid, but whatever that is, that feels like you're actually taking care of yourself. And so I think sometimes that is what you have to do. I think there are times where you got to get, with people, anybody, not just, those kind of relationships. You have to just go, that's bullshit. I don't buy that. Don't talk to me that way. Whatever that is. I think there's appropriate times for that.
100%.
Okay. So, all right.
Yeah. You can also remind yourself what you're made of, which shifts you into a little better state, and just go from there.
Sort of check in with yourself.
Check in, yeah.
When somebody will say, why would you do something like that? Which is basically saying, I don't like what you did. I have a couple answers. And one of them is because I'm a worthless piece of shit. I say it sarcastically. I don't say it because I believe it. It's like, is that what you're trying to say to me? That's really what I'm saying. Is that what you're trying to say to me? That that's probably not the way to go, but it has worked.
Oftentimes people avoid situations if they don't feel like they can adequately protect themselves emotionally. Yeah. If we learn to use our voice, if we can trust that we will use our voice in defense of our spirit, in defense of our heart, then we can go to more places. Because it's like, if this isn't working for me, I'll speak up. And in the book, I write about spirit vows. It's like an agreement you have with your inner self to, maybe a parent didn't stand up for me when I was little and things were happening I didn't like. Well, guess what? I'm the adult now, and I'll stand up. And that doesn't mean it's licensed to be an inconsiderate jerk, but you can just speak to what you need. And, I think it's really helpful. It's a beautiful thing to sometime when you're alone and quiet and you have some space, just to have an agreement with your own heart. I vow to hold you as sacred and worthy of protection. And just remember that in those times. It's not about, lashing out. It's just, you can think of it as, I'm going to speak as an empowered adult. And the sooner you do it, the easier it is to do it. And that takes fearlessness. It takes it takes being willing to have a difficult conversation potentially. And that's where the courage, comes into play. And I came across a really great concept the other day, which I love, and it's the hero and the coward initially feel the same thing. And it's what they do next that makes them what they are. And so when we can learn to call up the best part of ourselves in a moment, the more empowered, resourceful part of ourselves, we can feel more permission to no is appropriate, to say yes when yes is appropriate, and whatever else is in between. And so that next right action is just more obvious when you're connected to your own value. And that's really what a soul statement is meant to align you with.
That's a perfect ending, because I know you have to get off.
I do.
Corey Lyon Folsom. The book is Soul Statements. And there's a website too.
That's right. corerelationship.com. So CORE relationship. There's a page about the book. There's another page about my coaching approach. And there's a couple dozen articles that I've written. So
awesome. If you need more Corey Lyon Folsom, that's where you go. To that website.
That's right.
Everything is there. Photos.
Everything. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yep. Some photos.
Everything. Yeah. You get to see Corey. You get to see him in photos. You get to see his book. You can buy it. You can do all kinds of things. Maybe you'll want to be coached, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. I'm sorry if I was a little too jokey there at the end.
It's all
I'm
good
sincere.
Here.
I am sincere. I want people to check you out.
Thank you, Bob. This has been a great conversation.
Same here, man. Have a great evening. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. There is a YouTube channel where you can listen. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank Corey Lyon Folsom for being on the show. And please check out his new book, Soul Statements. Have a great day. Thank you.